And recording. All right, everybody. I am recording. Welcome to our learning bites. It is Tuesday, and we have these every Tuesday and every Thursday at 3:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So welcome to our learning bites. And I am Angelique Beslick. I am the owner of the Bridge Ventures LLC, and I own the healthcare supply chain hub. So I'm so glad that you guys are here. This is your place for supply chain training. We are going to get into our topic today, which is being recall ready, building a bulletproof recall response system. And as you guys know, as you have been taking my certification programs out there, I talk about building a system. Everything needs a system. Yes, you can have a process. Yes, you can have a policy, but you've got to have a system to run it all. I'm not talking about your ERP system or an application. I'm just talking about having a system of how things function, how things are governed, how you manage things, who roles and responsibilities within it. So recalls, especially, must have a system. So I'm going to talk to you today about how you're going to build a bulletproof recall response system. Okay, so here we go. I'm super excited. Let's jump on in. Um, I am going to say, and as I go through this, you're going to get some of the definitions of recalls, what they are, how many different types of recalls there are on products, but they are not an if. They are a when. They will happen. If you're new to healthcare supply chain, they happen and they happen often. I'm actually going to go through some numbers here shortly. You're going to see how often they happen. So, from devices to supplies to pharmaceuticals to food, every department in healthcare is touched by recalls. So, really, what I'm touching on today is a delayed response can risk patient safety. You could get regulatory fines. It actually breaks trust. And usually, supply chain is who manages all of the recalls. Now, you may have your pharmacy department managing pharmaceutical recalls. You may have your food and nutrition team managing food recalls, but usually supply chain is the gatekeeper. So today we're going to break down how to create a recall ready culture that is fast, coordinated, reliable. And this is actually, you're going to see it a couple times through this presentation. It is a culture. It is a system and it has to be part of your culture. It has to be ingrained into your healthcare health system, your hospital, your surgery center, wherever you work today. It has to be ingrained as a culture. Okay. So, our key takeaways for today, we need to understand the recall life cycle. And that kind of goes from either FDA or the manufacturer to supply chain, because we are kind of that conduit, and then frontline response that has to happen. We are also then going to think about identifying the unique risks by category. So devices, supplies, pharmacy, food, all those different categories can be affected by recalls. So we really want to make sure we are identifying those unique risks by category. And I'm going to kind of go through that today. Then we are going to learn best practices for lot traceability, documentation, digital tools. I'm actually going to walk you through how to do an RFP for the digital tools that are out there that manage recalls. And then I want to build a cross-functional recall strike team. That's what I'm going to have on your massive action checklist for tomorrow. And as you walk away with the checklist, you're going to be improving your recall readiness starting tomorrow. So you guys know I always give you at the end of my learning bites, I give you the recording, I give you the PowerPoint I'm showing you today, but I also give you that massive action checklist. So I'm bringing you value and you go take it away and you go do tomorrow. So for those of you who are not live on the call today and you're watching this, make sure that you also are looking at the massive action checklist. And any of you who are my YouTube followers, which I know there's a bunch of you, if you're not already on my mailing list, reach out to me and I can send you that massive action checklist because this is a hot topic, recalls. Okay, so let's get rocking and rolling. So why recalls matter? Did you guys know that there's over 100,000 recalls annually across devices, drugs, and food? That number just blows me away because that is a lot of work. And every delay in a recall is equal to a patient safety risk. It impacts compliance, trust, especially with our patients, and operations, clinical operations, operations at your hospital. It impacts all these things because if you're pulling something off the shelf because there's a recall, you have to hope that for patient care, you have another product to put back on that shelf, whether it's a different lot number that's not affected or a substitution. And this is where things get really sketchy because people are like, well, I don't have a substitute for that, but we have to provide patient care. So what's our plan B? And it gets very difficult because you've got to do all this rigmarole to get with clinicians, understand what plan B is and how patient care is still going to sustain tomorrow if you pull all those items off of the shelf today. So that is why recalls matter. The recall life cycle, let's just go through that really quick. Manufacturer does a notification of some sort, or the FDA has a classification and alert that also happens. I'm going to go through the types of recalls out there: manufacturer driven, FDA driven, voluntary, non-voluntary, and you're going to kind of see what that means. Now, if you have an application system today that sends you the alert, awesome, right? Because you guys, some of you are paying for those systems to do that. Then there's the supply chain communication, right? That is all part of what is your process at your health system to then go to the next step, how to get it off the shelf. Pharmacy, biomed, clinical engineering, food services. Some of them are managing those alerts themselves. Sometimes supply chain manages them. I always say when you've met one health system, you've met one health system. Everyone's doing it differently. And then really figuring out what is your process? Who's managing it? Is it supply chain every time going to the shelf, taking it off the shelf, checking for lot numbers, pulling it? And then how do you document and do your compliance reporting? Because if you have a system where you actually have to reply to the recall, you have to do that in the system. If you have a letter that you've received from the manufacturer or from the FDA, you actually have to fill out that letter, keep a copy of it, file it for your records that you did it, attach it to the product. If you have to do a return of the product to the manufacturer, all these things have to happen. And that documentation and compliance needs to happen. Now, I personally have been involved in many lawsuits that involved recalled items. Okay. It is not fun as a supply chain leader to be called into deposition in a courtroom when an item was recalled and a patient is suing us. I always pray when those things happen that my health system I worked for had an amazing life cycle system process for recalls, because then if you didn't, you know who's winning the lawsuit, right? So this is a very, very hot topic, and I want to make sure you have this down. You must have a process. If a recalled item is implanted into a patient, for example, or was used on a patient and it's involved in a lawsuit, now the patient is suing us, right? There is going to be a rigorous discovery on what your process was to pull that off the shelf. And if you can't prove that you had a system, there's going to be a lot of problems for your health system. So I really want to make sure you're paying attention. You are asking your leaders, do we have a process? What is the process? I want to make sure I'm well versed in the process because we don't want to have these problems happen to us. So let's look at the recall types. This is like big picture, 30,000 foot view. So the recalls in healthcare, you've got devices, drugs, food, supplies, etc. They're categorized in two main ways. Who initiates them? There's voluntary versus mandatory. Mandatory being FDA ordered. And then there's the severity or the risk level. There's class 1, 2, or 3. And you need to know both dimensions of a recall to understand what you're dealing with and how fast you need to move. Okay, I'm going to say a mandatory FDA ordered recall that is the highest class is going to be move our butts within the next 5 minutes and go get it off the shelf. And so as we go through this big picture, you really need to understand and set up some rules in your health system of how fast you move, why, and when, depending on the different recall types. So here's just a snippet. Anyone can Google this, but I want you guys to really understand it. There's voluntary recalls, there's FDA mandated recalls. Okay, so for the voluntary recalls, the manufacturer or distributor initiates it on their own, often after discovering a problem internally or receiving a complaint. Okay, most recalls fall in this category. So over 95% of that 100,000 fall in this category. And it actually just shows that the manufacturer is proactively addressing a defect, a safety risk, quality issue before the FDA steps in. And a real world example, a syringe manufacturer notices a lot contamination in a lot number, and it notifies the customers before any injuries occur. Okay, so the most of our recalls are this way. FDA mandated involuntary recall. Okay, the FDA orders the company to recall the product because it presents a significant public health risk and the company has failed or refused to act. These are much rarer, but they are very, very serious. And the FDA can take legal action, seize products, and impose penalties on the manufacturer if something like this happens. So a real world example, FDA orders recall of a contaminated injectable drug after patient harm and company noncompliance. So when I was talking about patient lawsuits to a health system, it could happen that way, that there was a patient harm event and we figured out that the root cause of that was an injectable drug, maybe, and it was contaminated. And then the FDA got wind of, or the complaint came straight to the FDA from the courthouse, right? From the lawsuit itself. And then they forced action, right? So key takeaway, voluntary doesn't mean it's optional though. It's just who initiates the recall. Once it's issued, you're still legally obligated to act as a health system. Okay. So I don't want you to think like, oh, it's a voluntary recall. I don't need to do anything. I don't need to pull it off my shelf. But you still have to act. You still have to pull it off your shelf, or you have to do whatever the letter says that you need to do. Now, once in a while, there are recalls where the manufacturer said, we may be pulling something off of our shelves. We're not sure yet. We're in the middle of an active investigation. We want you just to be aware of it. And you actually could make a decision if you want to pull it off your shelves early before a recall is mandated or not, depending on your stock, your patience, your utilization, all these things. And you may have gotten those type of letters in the mail as well. Let's talk about the recall classes, those severity levels. Class 1 is the dangerous or defective product that could cause serious health problems or death. Response urgency is immediate action required. Remove all inventory, patient use, and report status promptly. And some examples of these could be contaminated IV fluids, mislabeled medications, malfunctioning heart devices. Okay. Class 1 is your worst, most serious. If you see that on a recall notice, I am telling your team, drop everything and go take care of it immediately. Don't be like, yeah, I got this recall notice. It's on my desk. It says it's a class 1. Maybe I'll take care of that tomorrow. That is not the situation here. Class 2, okay? Product may cause temporary or reversible health problems and has a small chance of serious harm. Response urgency fast, but not life-threatening. Urgency, notify departments and pull stock promptly. Still pull it promptly. I am not talking about 24 hours from now. I'm still talking about within an hour. Try to pull it promptly. Some examples: defective syringes, understrength medication, devices with intermittent faults. It still could cause patient harm if used on a patient. I'm not saying that you need to run to go get the inventory like a class 1, but class 2, you should probably do something pretty immediate within the first hour of you getting that. Class 3, product unlikely to cause harm, but it violates labeling or manufacturing laws. It's a low urgency. Track, document, incorrect labeling and packaging issues, maybe a mislabeling, incorrect expiration date, cosmetic defect, wrong color on the label, something. So think of it as this: Class 1, emergency room; Class 2, urgent care; Class 3, administrative fix. And this is where I want you to look at a market withdrawal versus a recall. And people mix these up. A market withdrawal is a product is removed from the market for a minor issue not subject to FDA enforcement, maybe a slight packaging defect or a cosmetic flaw. That is what I was talking about earlier about this letter that you may have get in the mail from a manufacturer saying, the labeled color printed out funny, or we didn't like the way that the packaging looked. You could still use it on a patient. It's not going to cause harm. It's kind of up to you to decide if you're going to pull all your stock off the shelf. Versus a recall, a product removal due to violation of an FDA law or a health or safety risk, contaminated medication or mislabeled allergens, something like that. Recalls, you have to take them serious. A market withdrawal or a letter that just says, hey, we're looking at this for a potential recall. Those are alerts to you, and your health system needs to have a process of how to handle both. Okay, so make sure that your team is talking about the 2 recall types, the 3 severity and risk levels in your classes, and then a market withdrawal versus a recall. And you need to, in your recall policy, have your decision-making points for all of those, okay? So categories and challenges. So thinking about devices. These are patient safety issues. You have a downtime risk. You may have to cancel cases. If you have to pull all the stock off the shelves and you don't have a substitute, devices cause challenges. They are a patient safety risk. Supply, depending on the volume, depending on lot number and tracking, let's just say you have hundreds of them on your shelf and only one lot number is affected and you still have 10 other lot numbers on your shelf. Not too big of a challenge depending on your volume. If your entire volume that's on your shelf is the one lot number, then you're going to have a challenge, right, with your inventory. Pharmacy, this is where you get into the whole class 1 to class 3 recalls. You pretty much get the gamut of all three, especially class 1s. And barcoding and other challenges happen within pharmacy. It's just like a device, those cause patient safety issues. There's lots of risk. There's downtime risk as well, included in pharmacy. So take those very, very seriously. Food usually is a contamination, an allergen, maybe peanuts accidentally got in something, and people are very, very allergic to peanuts who are allergic. Maybe there's a labeling error. Maybe it said nut free and it's really not nut free. Things like that. Those could cause challenges because if you have patients that on their chart they said no nuts, and we gave them something with nuts because there was a labeling error in a food, that could cause a humongous patient safety risk. And then, of course, downtime risk, right? So I want you to be thinking about what is the patient harm risk in a lot of these different categories that could get recalled. This little chart was out there, and I put the link down at the bottom of the slide of this company had come up with this really awesome chart of some things that you should do, some measures you should take when managing your recall process. And I'm just going to read these off real quick, but I think that they're very, very good and relevant. And I put some of these in your massive action checklist for tomorrow. Formation of some kind of a recall committee, documentation of your well-defined procedure. I'm going to tell you recalls should be a policy, not just a desk procedure or a supply chain procedure. It should be a health system policy where multiple departments are affected by this. You want to have a process flow for a recall in practice, analysis of your recall report. If you are not running your recall report weekly of what recalls have not been replied to, especially if there's 100,000 plus a year, you could have your health system at humongous risk. You need to do reporting in this area. Issuance of advisory notices, especially out to departments where let's just say Skippy is the assigned person answering all the food and nutrition recalls, and that person is on vacation for 2 weeks. Where do advisory notices go? Protocols for receipt of recalled devices or even items. What's your protocol for that? Do you have a quarantine area? You should have a quarantine procedure. Decision for recalled devices. Who makes decisions? Who reviews decisions? Especially if you're out of stock now because of a recall, who helps out from a clinical standpoint to say this is our plan B that we need to go into to sustain patient care, or are we going to be canceling cases? And then making sure you've got your corrective action and preventative action requests out there. So I just thought this was a great checklist, and I'm going to put many of these things in your massive action checklist. Some common gaps in recall response that I've seen personally at health systems I've worked at in the past. Manual spreadsheets. I'm going to say, people, get a system, pay for the annual fee for a recall system, please. And I'm going to show you some here in a minute. Manual spreadsheets, delayed communication, supply chain having that recall on their desk and then forgetting to tell someone about it. Siloed departments, not everyone's talking, not everyone's communicating, and then inconsistent documentation. So let's just say food nutrition's documenting their recalls well, pharmacy isn't, or vice versa. Supply chain usually is doing it well because they're overarching or managing the recall process within the health system, but other departments maybe not so much, right? Best practices. Using a digital recall management system. I'm going to show you some here in just 1 minute, but also ensuring your lot number traceability in your ERP system, whether you're using Workday, Lawson, Infor, PeopleSoft, Oracle, Do you use lot number traceability, especially with devices, implants, things that are very, very important? And then in your EMR system, your electronic medical record, like Epic or Cerner, whatever you're using, automate your notifications and your dashboards and your reporting. Okay. Make sure all that stuff is automated. Building a cross-functional strike team. Shoot, we have a really, really serious recall. What are we going to do about it? Have an ad hoc emergency response strike team that you could pull together at a whim's notice, like it's an emergency, and really figure out how you're going to handle it. And then clarifying your roles and responsibilities, not just within supply chain, but across your entire organization. Who's the executive sponsor of the recall program? Who manages it? Who's in charge? So I am not here to sell a recall management system. I'm just giving you guys some ideas of a bunch of them that are out there, some of their strengths, some of notes and considerations. This is on Google. I pulled this from Google. This is not Angelique's opinion. This is not Angelique selling anything. I really don't have one recall system that I prefer over another. I've used almost all of these at different health systems I've worked at. So I'm not saying that because one recall's on the top that they're the best. This came from Google. Okay. You can actually ask Google which one's the best, why, pros and cons, things like that. So there's one recall, which is owned by Inmar. There's ECRI. Everyone knows ECRI and their recall management system. MedTech has a program. Sedgwick, Par Excellence has one. Armis, Quest has one. HM Product Solutions, Manage Recalls. Some of these I have not used. Maybe one or two of them I have never even heard of. But here's some information on them. Take this, go investigate. If you do not have a recall management system, do an RFP and do one right away. This is a compliance thing. This is something that you must spend money on. This is something that you cannot be stingy on. This is something that affects patient safety. So if your health system does not have a recall management system, you need to do an RFP right away. Things to evaluate when you're vetting and doing your RFP. When you evaluate these companies, dig into their breadth of domain coverage. Does the solution cover devices, supplies, pharmacy, food, lab, or is it just pharma, or is it just devices? Does it, automatically match your alerts with your on-hand stock? Does it integrate with your ERP system, your EMR system? Does it integrate? And does it understand lot number, serial number, UDI, all these things, make or break capabilities? Real-time notifications and escalation workflows are a must. Auditability, can you audit it? Compliance, documentation, what's your auditing trail? Evidence, notes, corrective actions. Scalability and execution capability, can you do it across multiple systems and facilities? Non-acute and acute, can you do it everywhere? Reputation, references, domain experience, peer, case studies. Some of the vendors have a big name, right? Does that make them gold? Maybe they'll even do a pilot for you. And then, of course, the cost model, flexibility, fees, all those things. But remember, one lawsuit from a patient is well worth getting one of these systems, right? Because the settlement you're going to pay to some poor family with a patient harm event is going to make you shake your head going, why didn't I get one of these systems, right? So, and why didn't we have a policy? And why didn't we have a procedure? Why don't we have an executive sponsor? And why isn't compliance involved in this process? And why don't we have procedures and policies? That the first time you get a patient lawsuit, you're going to think twice about not having all of this system set up. So your massive action checklist starting tomorrow. I want you to audit your current recall response time and your process. I want you to map your recall stakeholders. Who's assigned to putting together recalls if one happens? I want you to run a recall drill. I want you to verify your lot number traceability. I want you to update your SOPs by category. And I want to make sure you have a policy, right? I want you to assign department leads, document your processes centrally as a health system, and then I want you to schedule quarterly reviews of this stuff. When I give you this checklist, there's a lot more on here, okay? This is just a recap and a small summary of your massive action checklist. But I told you lots of things today, of things that will help you cover your butt when we're talking about recalls. And if you have to go out for an RFP for a recall management system, then that's what you need to do. So, some final thoughts on this. Recalls test not only your systems, but your culture of safety within your organization. So be proactive, not reactive. And for suppliers out there, because I have a ton of you supplier friends, you need to help your customers, the health systems through this process if you know there's a recall. You need to help them to make sure if they're pulling that stock off the shelf that they have a sub, that they have a plan B to make sure patient care still continues today, tomorrow, and into the future. I need to see you suppliers helping your customers get through recalls. Okay. Super duper important. And as always, I hope you guys are always getting my emails. Check your spam. I'm going to send you this PowerPoint. I'm going to send you the recording. I'm going to send you your massive action checklist. This is a hot topic. Make sure you get all of the information that I send you guys today. I see we're a minute over. This is such a hot topic. This is such a big topic. Anyone have any questions on the call or anything that you want to say before we have to hang up?
Angelique, it's Heidi, and I always have to comment. So I'm going to I want to comment on this because your team has done an amazing job. And, it's humanly impossible to have relationships with every single manufacturer or distributor that the hospital's purchasing from. But there's always those key manufacturers, especially on the implantable side. And you guys have done just an outstanding job of having relationships with them so that when there are recalls, you already have that built into your policy to work with either the local distributor or the local sales rep that's covering that product line.
Thank you, Heidi. Thank you. Well, that's because they have Angelique working there.
Amen, sister.
Any other comments from the team? All right. Well, it is so good to see you all. Thank you. Make sure that this is a hot topic in your next all team meeting, your next leadership meeting. And I will see you guys not on Thursday. We're skipping Thursday this week. I will see you guys next Tuesday. All right, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.